Welcome to the Blue Cafe. We offer stories of betrayal, infidelity, and redemption, raw, honest, and deeply human. Each episode dives into the tangled lives of those facing heartbreak and hard choices, where truth isn't always clean, but growth is always possible. Now on to today's story. Chapter 1. The Grapes Ripen. The rows of vines rolled over the hills like quiet green waves, steady and certain under the rising Okanagan sun. Mark Halden stood at the edge of his vineyard, coffee in hand, boots sunk lightly into the dust of the upper slope. Harvest season was less than 2 weeks away, and the grapes were turning, a flush of purple showing on the Pinot Noir, deepening daily. He took a sip from his thermos and nodded once, as if the vines had just answered back. From this high vantage, he could see the old farmhouse he and Kara bought 7 years ago, its white siding now weathered gray, the porch half-shaded by the twisted willow they'd planted in the first spring. It was peaceful here. Too peaceful lately. Kara didn't come up to the vineyard anymore, not unless she had a reason. She used to bring lunches in the early days, sometimes a bottle of chilled rose in the evening. Lately, she stayed in town longer. Errands, she said, or visits to the yoga studio, the farmer's market, her cousin in Peachland. She had reasons. They always sounded reasonable. Mark didn't ask too many questions. He'd never been the kind to pry. He finished his coffee, flicked the grounds out onto the dirt, and started walking the east rows with his clipboard. He took notes. Growth was on schedule. No signs of powdery mildew. The irrigation system had been fussy earlier in the week, but Leo had fixed it fast. The seasonal crew would be arriving soon. Mostly college kids, backpackers, and a few lifers like Leo, who came every year. That rhythm helped. The work always helped. By the time he circled back to the barn, the sun was high, and the metal roof was already warming up. Leo's truck was parked beside the equipment shed, dented and dusty as always. Inside, Leo was oiling the grape press and muttering at it like it owed him money. Mark leaned against the doorway. "You talk to that thing. It might just file a complaint." Leo chuckled without looking up. "She's got attitude, this one. Keeps pretending she's 20 years younger, like Kara." Mark didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. "You finished with the irrigation valve?" "Yesterday. Should hold through harvest." Leo stood, wiped his hands on a rag. "You all right, boss? You've been, I dunno, quiet." "I'm always quiet." "Yeah, but this is a new kind. More like a pause before something." Mark didn't answer right away. He looked out toward the house again. The curtains in the upstairs bedroom were drawn, even though Kara usually left them open to let in the light. A small, distant flicker of unease passed through him, not enough to call it fear. Just a wait. "You know something about grapevines?" he asked suddenly. Leo blinked. "A few things, I'd hope. They only grow deep roots when they're stressed. The worse the soil, the deeper they go looking." Sounds like a hell of a marriage metaphor. Mark nodded once slow. "Yeah, it does." Later that afternoon, Kara returned from town in her white SUV, tires crunching slow on the gravel drive. She stepped out with a paper bag from the organic grocer and a new haircut, shorter, lighter at the ends, with a kind of breezy flair she hadn't bothered with in months. She looked like the version of herself she'd been before they bought the vineyard. Back when she worked in marketing and drank wine only at gallery openings. "New hair?" he asked mildly, meeting her on the porch. She kissed him lightly on the cheek. "Thought I'd change it up." "You like it?" "It's fine." "Everything all right?" she asked. "You've been, I don't know, in your own world lately." "Just thinking about the harvest. Crew's coming next week. Got a lot to prep." "Yeah," she said. "It's going to be a busy month." She brushed past him and went inside. He heard the fridge door open, then close. He waited a long moment before following. That night, they ate dinner on the back deck, roasted chicken and greens, wine from last year's vintage. The sky turned golden, then lilac. Kara scrolled her phone absently between bites. Mark watched the horizon instead. He didn't mention the scent on her clothes, cologne that wasn't his, musky and unfamiliar. He didn't ask why the back seat of her SUV had a sleeping bag stuffed under the seat when he loaded her groceries. He didn't speak of any of it. Instead, he refilled her glass, then his own. Because it was harvest season, and you don't throw out the vines just because you spot a few bad grapes. Not yet. Chapter 2. New hands in the field. By Monday, the hired crew began arriving. Mark always took care to walk the fields early, before the day's chaos. He liked the cool morning hush, the way the mist curled low between the rows, and how the dew clung to the grape leaves like silver thread. Out here, he could think clearly. Out here, the world hadn't caught fire yet. The crew assembled by the barn just after 8 a.m. 6 new faces and 2 returning ones. Most were in their 20s, international students, gap-year adventurers, or locals looking for side cash. They leaned against their cars, sipping coffee from thermoses, sizing each other up, waiting for instructions. One of them stood apart. Tall, athletic, wavy brown hair pulled into a low ponytail. Maybe mid-20s. Confident posture without trying too hard. War-worn jeans and a plain tee, like someone used to manual work. He hadn't brought a backpack or gear bag, just his arms crossed and eyes steady on the vines. Mark stepped forward. "All right," he said. "I'm Mark Halden, owner. Foreman's name is Leo. He'll be running most of the day today. If you have questions, take them to him unless it's a safety issue or a payroll one. Harvest's expected to peak within the week, so expect early mornings and long afternoons." They nodded, some more eagerly than others. He looked at the quiet one in the back. "You, what's your name?" "Jake," the man said. "Jake Mercer. From Penticton. You worked Harvest before?" 3 seasons. Mostly Merlot and Riesling blocks. Last year in Naramata. Mark gave a slow nod. "All right. Stick close to Leo for now. We'll see where you fit." Jake gave a tight smile. "Yes, sir." By midday, the sun beat down hard, and the crew was already flagging. Mark spent the morning calibrating the hydrometer, checking the Brix levels on the ripening clusters, and watching from a distance. Kara came out mid-afternoon, just as the new crew was breaking for water. She rarely came to the vineyard during the workday anymore. She used to. Especially when they first started. Took photos for the website, made little social media videos about the harvest. But this year, she'd been detached, letting Mark and Leo handle the operation. So when she pulled up and stepped out in her sundress and wide-brimmed hat, heads turned. Jake's turned, too. Mark saw it. She waved to him, "Mark, not Jake," and walked over, smiling. "Thought I'd bring lemonade." Mark nodded. "Thanks. Thought it might be nice to meet the crew, too. Give the new faces a friendly welcome. You're the boss's wife. Do what you like." She tilted her head, like she heard the edge in his tone, but chose to ignore it. "I'll bring some over, chat a bit." He watched her approach the crew with a relaxed smile, offering cold drinks and easy laughter. She knew how to disarm a room, especially men. Mark saw the way her eyes landed on Jake for a second too long. Not a look, just too deliberate. Jake didn't flirt. Not openly. He was respectful. But he looked back. Later that evening, Leo found Mark by the tractor shed. "She hasn't been around in a while," Leo said, leaning against the doorframe, cigarette in hand. "Your wife?" "No," Mark replied. "She's different." Mark didn't answer. Leo exhaled smoke slowly. "Kid named Jake seems sharp. Strong back. Keeps his mouth shut. Could be useful." "Could be." Leo hesitated. "You sure you want him here?" Kara seemed real chatty with him. Mark gave a slow shrug. "Not the first pretty face she smiled at. Won't be the last." Leo studied him. "You planning on doing something about it?" "Maybe. You always this calm when your house is on fire?" Mark looked up, expression unreadable. "Fire puts itself out, one way or another." That night, Mark and Kara ate dinner quietly. Kara chatted about a yoga retreat someone had invited her to next weekend. She was vague about who. Mark didn't ask. After she went upstairs to shower, he walked to the old filing cabinet in the office, pulled out the vineyard's ownership papers. He ran his fingers along the edge of the folder and stared out the window toward the dark vineyard hills. The grapes were almost ready. So was he. Chapter 3, The Late Shift. The nights were starting to cool. The lake mist hung low in the morning now, and Mark could smell the shift in the season. Everything slowed in September except the grapes and the people who picked them. They rushed toward ripeness, toward the moment of truth. That meant longer hours in the field, earlier alarms, and sharper instincts. And for Kara, it meant later nights in town. She had another community board meeting that evening, something about fundraising for a gallery renovation in downtown Kelowna. She'd left in a rush just after dinner, blouse neatly tucked, perfume subtle but expensive. Mark noticed the makeup, too. She hadn't worn lipstick in weeks, But tonight it was on in that color he used to say made her look dangerous. She didn't kiss him goodbye. Mark didn't ask questions. He didn't stop her. He only waited 5 minutes after the sound of her SUV faded down the gravel road, then grabbed his keys and walked calmly to his old Ford pickup. He knew where the community meeting was supposed to be. And more importantly, he knew where it wasn't. 9:12 p.m. Mark turned off the highway and followed a winding road up the ridge that overlooked the southern vineyards and lake beyond. There was a pull-off just before the summit, a panoramic lookout with a stone bench and a tiny gravel lot. Locals knew it well. Teenagers made out here. Couples came for sunsets. Some people came for privacy. Kara's SUV was parked under a burnt-out street lamp, half hidden behind a cedar. Mark didn't pull in. He coasted past, lights off, and parked around the bend. He stepped out quietly, walking the last 100 meters on the gravel shoulder. His boots made a crunching sound that set his teeth on edge, so he stopped short. He didn't creep closer. He didn't take photos. He didn't need to. From where he stood, he could see silhouettes, 2 of them. Someone was in the driver's seat with Kara, leaned toward her. They weren't talking. The shapes were close. Very close. He stood there for a long minute. Maybe longer. Then he turned and walked back to the truck. The next morning, Kara returned just before dawn. She smelled of wine and eucalyptus, and her hair was slightly mussed at the crown. She didn't think Mark would be awake, but he was already at the kitchen counter, peeling peaches for breakfast. "Oh," she said, blinking. "Didn't think you'd be up. Didn't sleep much." She walked past him, opened the fridge slowly. The meeting went long. "We ended up going out for a drink after. A few of us." He didn't reply. She closed the fridge door with a soft thud and looked at him. "You're not saying anything." He wiped his hands on a towel. "That's right. Are you upset?" "No," she frowned. "I feel like you're judging me." He turned to face her, expression flat. "Not my job to judge you. Just noticing." She looked away, lips tight. Later that day, Mark walked the lower rows with Leo. The fruit had deepened. Sugar levels were right where they needed to be. Picking would start in 2 days. Leo carried the field sheets. Mark carried silence. "You all right?" Leo finally asked. "I know." Leo didn't pretend to misunderstand. "The kid?" Mark nodded. "Saw her car." "Saw them." Leo swore under his breath. "Want me to say something to him?" "No. Let him think I don't know." "Why?" Mark ran a hand over a bunch of grapes, gentle as if checking a child's fever. "Because people don't get careful until they know they're being watched. I want to see how far they'll go." Leo nodded slowly. "That's cold, man." "No," Mark said. "It's calculated." That evening, Kara didn't come home. She sent a text around 7:30. "Staying at Mel's tonight. Girls' night. Don't wait up. Red heart." Mark stared at the message for a long moment. Then he stood, walked into the office, and opened a drawer in the filing cabinet. Inside were his personal banking records, the title to the Vineyard, and a plain black notebook. He flipped it open. On the first page, he wrote, September 12th, Kara left at 6:50 p.m. Jake stayed late in the southern rows. Said he was reorganizing crates. Kara's SUV seen parked by the ridge at 9:10 p.m. Returned home at 5:43 a.m. the following morning. No direct confrontation. He closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. In the distance, the vineyard slept under the pale glow of the harvest moon. Mark poured a glass of the last vintage, deep, red, and clean. He took a slow sip and stared out at the rows of vines that twisted across his land. There was no rage in him, no shouting, just clarity. The fruit would be picked, the wine would be made, and after that, something would end. Chapter 4, Talking Vines. The first day of harvest dawned cool and overcast, the sky a muted pewter that made the grapes glow deeper in contrast. Workers moved like ants across the rows, clippers snapping, crates filling fast with the swollen fruit of another year's labor. A low hum of activity buzzed through the vineyard. Laughter, Spanish and English mixing, boots crunching across dry soil. Mark was up before all of them. He'd already walked the south slope by the time the first car pulled in. He noted where the dew was heavy, where the rows held moisture, where the birds had picked at the outer vines. He noted, too, that Jake was the last to arrive. 20 minutes late, no excuse, but no apology either. Mark said nothing. He just handed Jake a crate and pointed him to block 3. Leo joined Mark near the barn shortly after. He held 2 coffees in gloved hands, offering one silently. Mark took it and sipped. Black. No sugar. You're running on diesel fumes, Leo said. You sleep at all? Not much. Leo sipped his own coffee, watching the workers haul full crates onto the tractor trailer. This your best year yet, fruit-wise? Mark nodded. Looks that way. Leo tilted his head. And yet, you look like a man walking into a courtroom instead of a payday. Mark didn't answer. Mid-morning, Emily called. Mark rarely answered personal calls during harvest, but he picked up the second he saw her name flash on the screen. Hey, he said, moving toward the quieter side of the barn. You okay? Emily's voice was alert, clear. She was always the type to cut through nonsense in a sentence and a half. I'm fine. No, you're not. I saw the weather update for Kelowna and figured you'd be in the thick of it. Then I checked Kara's Instagram. Mark said nothing. She posted a sunset pic, Emily continued, tagged at a winery in Naramata. Alone, quoting some crap about finding peace in the places you don't belong. What the hell's going on? She's seeing someone. A long pause. Oh, Emily said. Jake, Mark added. One of the new hires. Younger. Handsome. Confident. What are you doing about it? Gathering facts. Emily's voice dropped. You're not just going to wait it out, are you? No, Mark said calmly. I'm preparing. There was a beat of silence. Then her voice softened. Do you need help? Mark looked out over the rows of vines, then at the house up on the hill. I might. Later that afternoon, Kara returned. She parked beside the barn, stepped out wearing heels and a camel-colored coat that looked out of place among the dirt and sweat and sunburn. The crew barely noticed. Everyone was too busy moving crates, loading trailers. But Jake looked up. Mark noticed that, too. She walked straight to Mark, clipboard in hand, as if she belonged there again. Thought I'd help with the inventory, she said casually. He raised an eyebrow. Since when? She smiled thinly. It's still half my business, isn't it? Technically. She glanced out at the rows, where Jake was working beside the foreman. Her gaze lingered. Mark saw it. Something on your mind? He asked. No, she said quickly, just admiring the yield. Mark stepped closer. You think I don't know what's going on? Kara stiffened. She didn't answer. He leaned in, voice low, cold. You think I can't see it? That I don't watch what people do when they don't know they're being seen? She blinked. I've known for weeks, he said. Kara's jaw flexed. And you say nothing? You're not worth yelling over. She opened her mouth, closed it again. For a moment, something like shame flickered across her face, but it passed. She turned and walked toward the house. That evening, Mark sat with Leo in the back shed, sharing a beer in silence. You told her, Leo said finally. Not everything. What now? Mark took a long breath, exhaled slowly. Now I sell. Leo blinked. The vineyard? Mark nodded. Been thinking about it for a while. It's time. Leo shook his head slowly. You sure? This place started as a dream. It's turned into a cage. He sipped his beer again, then looked out the window toward the twilight fields. She can have the house. Let her grow her own damn grapes if she wants. Leo grunted. That's a cold cut. No, Mark said. It's clean. That night, in the quiet dark of his office, Mark opened the black notebook again and added a new entry. September 14th, Kara returned to Vineyard mid-harvest. Invented excuse to monitor inventory. Jake and Kara exchanged prolonged glances. Confrontation occurred. No denial. No apology. Decision made. Begin preparations to liquidate business assets. Title review complete. Initial realtor contact established. He closed the notebook, turned off the desk light, and sat a while in the dark, listening to the wind rustling the vines through the open window. Some truths don't require shouting. They just need to be acted on. Chapter 5, Harvest begins. The morning sun broke through a veil of low fog, lighting up the rows in soft gold. It was harvest weather, just warm enough to keep the grapes supple, cool enough to avoid rot. The kind of day vineyard owners prayed for in the spring and quietly counted as gold in September. Mark didn't celebrate. He stood by the edge of Block 3, arms crossed, watching the crew bend and cut, dump and haul. His hat shaded his eyes, his expression unreadable. Leo worked beside him, clipboard tucked under one arm, coordinating trailer runs and checking bricks levels. A quiet machine of muscle and efficiency. Jake was in Block 5 today by design. Far from the house. Far from Kara. Mark made sure of it. Kara hadn't shown her face since the conversation 2 days ago. She was still sleeping late, staying out, dodging eye contact in the hallway. Mark didn't press. He'd already made his move. The rest would follow. Around 9 a.m., Emily showed up. She pulled her black SUV beside the barn and stepped out in boots and denim, sunglasses tight to her face. She carried a laptop case in one hand and a thermos in the other. Mark met her halfway. "Still remember the smell," she said, smiling faintly. "The dust, the sun, the sweat. You sure you want back in?" "I'm not here to pick grapes, Mark." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm here to help you sell," she added. "If you meant what you said." Mark nodded. "I meant it." "Good," she said. "Because I pulled comps from the last 3 years. You're sitting on a gold mine if you play it right. But we need to start now, before winter locks the market." They walked toward the house, Emily firing off numbers, buyer profiles, zoning quirks. She was a firestorm of precision. Mark barely spoke, but she read him like a map. Inside the house, Emily opened her laptop at the dining table. Kara walked in just as she was pulling up aerial surveys of the property. They locked eyes. Kara froze for a second. "Didn't know we had company." Mark didn't look up. "You've been out a lot. Hard to keep track." Emily gave Kara a polite smile. "Emily Mason. Old friend. Realtor now." "I remember," Kara said coolly. "You were at our wedding." Emily gave a tight nod. "I was." Silence hung between them like steam off hot asphalt. Kara folded her arms. "So, what's this about?" Mark finally looked up. "We're selling the vineyard." Kara's face didn't move at first, just her eyes. Flicking from Emily to Mark, reading the truth. "You're not serious." "I am." "You can't just decide that." "I can," Mark said. "And I have." Kara sat down slowly, like her legs were figuring out what gravity meant again. "You'd really throw away everything we built?" "You already did," Mark said. Emily closed her laptop softly and stood. "I'll give you 2 a moment." After Emily left the room, the silence between Mark and Kara turned sharp. "This isn't just yours," Kara snapped. "I have a stake in this." "You'll get your half," Mark said. "More than fair." "And then what?" "You go do whatever you've been doing every other night," he said flatly. "Only difference is, you won't have to lie about it anymore." Her jaw clenched. "So that's it? You just walk away?" "I didn't walk," he said. "You pushed." Kara stared at him. "I made mistakes. I'll own that. But this vineyard, this life, we bled for it. You'd really let it go just to spite me?" Mark stood, hands on the back of the chair. "I'm letting it go because it used to be ours. And now it's just mine. And I don't want it anymore." She didn't cry. Kara wasn't the crying type. She stood, walked upstairs, and slammed the bedroom door behind her. Outside, the harvest hummed on. Mark joined Leo by the cold trailer, stacking the filled crates carefully. Jake was still in block 5, head down, focused. He didn't look up once, not even when Mark passed by. "Emily looks serious," Leo muttered. "She is." Leo spat into the dirt and wiped his brow. "You sure about this, boss?" Mark didn't answer right away. He scanned the vineyard, every inch of it, from the lakeview slopes to the tall grass at the fence line. Then he said, "Yeah, I'm sure." Leo gave a low grunt. "Hell of a chapter to close." "Chapters end," Mark said. "Books don't." That night, Mark took a bottle of the 2018 Reserve, one of their best years, and walked it to the backfield alone. He sat beneath the big willow by the property line, unscrewed the cap, and drank straight from the bottle. The sky above was clear and wide, stars scattered like shattered glass across velvet. He didn't feel peace, but he did feel movement, and that was something. Chapter 6, Bricks and Bloodlines. The next morning came with a sudden warmth, unusual for mid-September. The kind of heat that accelerated ripeness just enough to shift the schedule. Mark adjusted the harvest plan, moving up block 7 by a day. Sugar levels were peaking. Bricks readings showed 24.1. Perfect. Out in the rows, Leo ran the crews, and Jake, still keeping to himself, handled the east slope. Mark didn't micromanage. He didn't need to. He had other work to do now. He was meeting a lawyer. Downtown Kelowna, the law office of Doyle and Renner sat above a cafe that served fair trade espresso and vegan muffins. Mark wore clean jeans and a button-down, formal for him, and sipped bitter coffee while waiting in the firm's minimalist lobby. The lawyer, a 30-something woman named Naomi Doyle, greeted him with a firm handshake and a sharp eye. Selling the vineyard? She asked once they sat in her glass-walled office. Yes. Divorce? Not yet. Naomi didn't blink. You want to protect your assets. I want clean lines, Mark replied. And I want to do it legal. She opened a folder. You own the land outright. No debts, no partners besides your wife. That makes this simpler. He nodded. Naomi paused, then asked, Any children? Mark hesitated. No, she gave a quiet nod. Easier still. They went over details. Property boundaries, equipment inventory, the wine license, the permits, the zoning quirks unique to agricultural land in the Okanagan. Naomi was efficient, focused. At the end of the hour, she closed her notebook and looked up. You understand that once this process starts, there's no halfway. You're either in or out. I've been in too long, Mark said. It's time. Back at the vineyard, Emily had taken over the sunroom as a makeshift office. Her laptop hummed, phone on speaker as she walked a potential buyer through acreage stats and production numbers. Kara hovered in the hallway, silent. Emily ignored her at first, kept her tone smooth, her posture perfect. But when the call ended, she looked up. You need something? Emily asked. Kara stepped in. You're really pushing this sale through? I am. And what do you get out of it? Emily smiled faintly. Commission and peace of mind. Kara folded her arms. You always had a thing for Mark. Emily leaned back in the chair, unbothered. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. But at least I never lied to him. That hit. Kara's jaw flexed, but she didn't reply. You should start packing, Emily added, eyes back on her laptop. This is moving faster than you think. Kara stood there another beat, then turned and left without a word. Out in Block 2, Mark checked the clusters, running his thumb along the stems, testing for firmness. Leo joined him with a small cooler and a tired grin. You're doing all this like you're cleaning a rifle, Leo said. Mark smirked. Maybe I am. Got a buyer yet? Emily says we've got 3 offers incoming. Couple from Vancouver, 1 from Seattle. Leo grunted. Urban money. They'll turn this place into a wedding venue. Maybe, Mark said. Not my concern. Leo popped open the cooler and handed him a sandwich. So what's next? You going full recluse in a cabin somewhere? Mark shrugged. Not sure. Something quiet. Less acreage. Fewer lies. Leo chuckled. You ever think about what life looks like without all this? Mark looked out across the vineyard, now humming with workers and light and history. Then he answered, Every day. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the lake, Kara found Mark sitting on the porch. She brought out 2 glasses and a bottle of the 2016 vintage. It had been her favorite once. She poured him a glass without asking. He took it, nodded. They sat in silence for a long while. I didn't mean for it to get like this, she said eventually. I believe you. I just didn't know how to stop once it started. Mark sipped. That's what momentum does. Makes fools of all of us. Kara looked at him, truly looked this time. You hate me now? No, he said. I just don't trust you. And that's worse. She flinched, just slightly. I still remember what we were, she whispered. So do I, Mark said, standing slowly. That's why I'm leaving it behind. He went inside, leaving the wine half finished. Later that night, he wrote in the black notebook, September 17th met with lawyer. Naomi Doyle. Terms clean. Emily has 3 interested buyers. 2 Canadian, 1 US. Kara made small gesture. Too late. Nothing left to salvage. Time to finalize. He set the pen down and looked at the last line. Time to finalize. The phrase hit like a bell. It was no longer about pain, or betrayal, or anger. It was about clarity. And clarity, Mark had learned, was the final gift of a dying season. Interlude, when the soil was soft. 12 years earlier summer, South Kelowna back then, the land wasn't much to look at. 6 dry acres, a busted barbed wire fence, and a half-collapsed barn that leaned east like it was tired of standing. But the soil was good. Mark knew that the moment he dug his fingers into it and brought up handfuls of sandy loam. It smells alive, he said, standing there with dirt clinging to his palms. Kara laughed. You always say that about things you like. They were both younger then, tanned and lean, Mark with his sleeves rolled up and a fire in his gut, Kara in worn jeans and work gloves, eyes bright and sharp. They'd bought the land cheap. Kara's parents had thought they were insane. No irrigation, her father had said. No established vines. No power. You want to grow wine grapes on a patch of rock and rabbit droppings. Mark had shaken the man's hand anyway. Yes, sir. That's the plan. They lived in a trailer for the first 8 months. Kara cooked on a 2-burner propane stove and washed dishes in a plastic tub. Mark laid irrigation lines by hand. Every weekend, they planted another row. Vines ordered from nurseries in Penticton arrived in bundles wrapped like babies, rootstocks still moist. Mark tucked them into the dirt like a priest planting headstones. Gentle, reverent. Kara labeled each post with tags: Pinot Gris, Merlot, Cab Franc. At night, they'd sit on lawn chairs with a shared bottle of cheap red, sweat still drying on their skin, and stare out at the infant rose. This place will grow, Kara said. Just like us. Mark had nodded. We'll pour everything into it. Let it drink us dry. She'd smiled, slow and sure. Then we better be damn good wine. Year 3, they built the house. It wasn't fancy, just 2 floors, big windows, and a porch facing the west slopes. Kara picked the colors. Mark hammered the siding himself. They argued over flooring, over light fixtures, over whether the mudroom should face north or south. They made up under paint-splattered sheets. By year 4, they'd bottled their first vintage, barely 100 cases. Rough, acidic, but theirs. They named it First Light. They drank the first bottle on the roof, watching the sun melt into Okanagan Lake. You still in this with me? Kara had asked. Mark looked at her, dusted with plaster and wine stains. You're all I've got. She touched his cheek, gently. Then we're rich already. In those years, the vineyard was a living thing. It breathed with them. It grew with them. And for a while, it held them together like vines on a trellis. Pulling close, giving shape, catching the wind. But all vines, given time, must be pruned. Sometimes it's to encourage growth. Other times, to cut out the rot. Present-day Mark closed the old photo album. He sat alone in the back office, the faded pictures still glowing under the desk lamp. Kara laughing, dirt on her nose. Mark driving the first tractor, shirtless and proud. The sign they painted together, crooked letters reading Harlow Vines. He ran a thumb along the spine of the album. Then he slid it into the bottom drawer, beneath deeds and tax forms and wine competition certificates. A past worth remembering, but not repeating. Chapter 7, The Offers. By the time the last grapes from Block 7 were hauled in, the vineyard smelled like ripe fruit and hard work. Juice stained the crates deep purple, and the air had that fermented sharpness that only comes when harvest is in full swing. Inside the house, the mood had shifted. The silence between Mark and Kara had grown cold, professional. She'd stopped asking questions. He'd stopped offering answers. They moved around each other like co-workers at a failing company. Polite, precise, distant, Emily had taken over the dining room. Her laptop, files, and paperwork stretched across the old pine table like a campaign map. She moved with purpose, voice crisp, ponytail tighter than ever. And the offers had come in. 3 of them. Emily waited for Mark by the lake-facing window. She had the folders already color-coded, green, yellow, and red. Her expression was unreadable. All right, she said, sliding a folder across. Green light first. Mark opened it. Alexis and Brandon Feldman, a married couple from Vancouver, mid-30s, tech money. They wanted to turn the vineyard into a boutique winery/event venue. Organic rebranding, modern tasting room, full wedding packages. Full asking price, Emily said. And then some. They'll waive inspection. Mark raised an eyebrow. They ever run a vineyard? Nope, she said. But they've got a consultant lined up and 0 debt. Cash buyers. He closed the folder. Yellow, she continued, sliding the second folder forward. A guy named Marlon Simic. Ex-sommelier turned winemaker. Lives in Penticton. Wants to expand into Kelowna. Smaller offer, but more serious about the land. Wants to keep it a working vineyard. Mark nodded slowly. I'd consider that. Hold that thought, Emily said, pushing the third folder forward. Red light. Seattle investor. Wants to bulldoze everything and build a luxury spa retreat. Offered way above value. But it would erase the vineyard. Mark didn't touch the last folder. That one's not real, he said. Emily smirked. No, but his money is. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Outside, The sun was drifting low over the hills, long shadows cutting across the rows. "Which one would you take?" he asked. Emily shrugged. "Depends what you want to leave behind. Wine? Legacy? Ghosts?" Mark stayed quiet a while longer. Then he asked, "You remember the night we planted the first block?" Emily looked up at him slowly. "I wasn't there." "You were," he said. "You brought Kara coffee and stayed for 3 hours digging." Emily smiled faintly. "That was the only weekend I didn't have blisters for a month." He turned. "You said the soil smelled alive." She blinked. "I remember that. I wanted to stay alive," he said finally. "I'll take Simic's offer. Tell him he's got the vineyard, if he promises to keep it breathing." Emily nodded. "I'll make the call." That night, Mark told Kara over dinner, or rather, over silence and 2 half-eaten plates of leftover pasta. "Offer accepted," he said. She didn't respond at first. "Which one?" "Not the tech couple. Not the Seattle guy. The winemaker from Penticton." Kara looked at him. "So that's it. You'll walk away, and I get a check." "You'll get more than a check," he said. "You'll get a clean break." She stared at him across the table. "What if I don't want it?" Mark stood. "You should have thought of that before you picked someone else to fill your evenings." He left his plate untouched and walked out to the porch. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. The stars hung low and heavy. Mark leaned against the railing, taking it all in, the dark rows of vines, the soft hum of distant traffic, the quiet beating of his own heart. Emily joined him after a while, a mug of tea in her hand. "Simic's in," she said softly. "Wire transfer by the end of the week." Mark nodded. She looked at him. "How do you feel?" "Like I just amputated a limb," he said. "But I think I'll live." She smiled. "That's a start." He didn't say anything else. And for the first time in weeks, that silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. Chapter 8, The Farewell Rose. The morning of the final walkthrough was silent, windless. No birdsong, no tractors. Just dew clinging to leaves like the earth itself didn't want to let go. Mark stood at the edge of the vineyard in work boots and a hoodie, coffee in hand. From here, he could see all the blocks, young and old, thriving and bare. Each one a chapter in a story he had finally chosen to stop writing. Marlon Simic was due at noon. By then, it would no longer be his vineyard. He started with Block 1, First Light, the original planting. The vines were thicker now, trained and disciplined, their trunks scarred with age. He knelt at the end row, brushed a leaf aside, and looked at the tag Kara had written in faded ink all those years ago. PG, 1 Pinot Gris, row 1. She'd joked they should name the vines after dogs or old lovers. He'd said no, too sentimental. She'd done it anyway, in her own quiet rebellion. Back then, her defiance had made him smile. Now it just made him tired. In the winery building, Mark walked past the stainless steel fermenters, silent and empty now, and ran his hand along the oak barrels in the back. He remembered when they could only afford secondhand wood. The staves had smelled like wet tobacco and dreams. That first vintage, acidic, clumsy, but full of heart. They poured so much of themselves into it. Every stain on the floor, every scratch on the crush pad, told a story. And now it was someone else's story to write. Inside the house, Kara packed in silence. She wrapped glassware in old Harvest t-shirts and folded linens like she was trying not to make noise. Her suitcase sat open on the bed, half full. She wasn't crying. She hadn't cried at all since the confession. Mark watched from the door for a few seconds before speaking. "Where are you going?" She didn't look up. "Vancouver. I have friends. A job offer." He nodded. "Clean start." "Not clean," she said. "But start, yes." There was a long pause. "I never meant to hurt you," she said quietly. "You didn't mean not to," he replied. She winced, but didn't argue. Then he stepped forward and placed a small envelope on the dresser. Her name was written on it in black ink. "What's this?" she asked. "Your share. Plus some." "You don't have to. It's not for you," he said. "It's for who we were." She didn't answer. She didn't cry. She just nodded once. By noon, Simic arrived in a dusty Subaru with a binder full of vineyard maps and a grin like a man about to adopt a child. Mark met him at the driveway and handed over the keys. "Everything's marked. Records are in the office. Emily will send the last documents this week." Simic shook his hand with both of his. "You're leaving it in good shape. You've got my word. I'll keep it honest." Mark looked at him. "You'd better." They stood for a moment. Then Mark turned and walked away without looking back. His truck was already packed, just the essentials: a few clothes, his tools, the black notebook, and a small case with 3 bottles of their best vintage. He took one last drive through the rows, slow and quiet. His hand reached out the window once to brush a hanging cluster, the last harvest he'd ever touch here. He didn't say goodbye. The land wouldn't have heard him anyway. He drove north, past the lake, past the orchards, past the ghosts. Somewhere beyond Summerland, he pulled over at a lookout, stepped out, and watched the Okanagan spread before him like an old photograph. Blue water, golden hills, green rose stitched into soil like a quilt. He opened the glove box and pulled out a pen. In the back of the black notebook, he wrote, October 2nd, Vineyard sold. Carrigon. The vines will live on. So will I.